In this video, we're going to talk about recording some cues. So let's take a look at our sidebar. Sidebar is the window here on the right-hand side. If you can't see that, it might have been closed. Just go ahead, reopen a window on the right-hand side here, and go ahead and choose sidebar. Now, we've been using this a lot already because we've been using our fixture control area of the sidebar, but we're going to be talking about the current playback tab. This gives us access to, indeed, the current playback, which will show us whatever cue list is assigned. You'll see there is a drop down here. This allows you to change which cue list is assigned to the current playback, but by default it will of course be cue list 1. Now there's some useful information in the yellow text at the top of the sidebar here that's worth mentioning. This is the default. So to be clear, you can change this behaviour for every single cue you record, but this is the default behaviour. So first of all, record live. That means that the console will be recording all data that it's currently outputting each time you record a cue. Tracking mode is also the default. That means tracking is enabled as standard, and we'll be talking about tracking in another video and spending some time dedicated to looking at that. And then mark late is also the behaviour. What that means is if you're using colour changing fixtures, fixtures with beams, edges or moving lights, the console will always be looking at the next cue to see what your fixtures are up to see if they've got positions or colours or gobos that need to be prepped. And it will then prep them one cue before those lights are being used. So it's marking as late as possible. It's prepping your lights as late as it can. Top right, we've then got these toggles, effects, sub and palettes. By default, these are on. So that means when you record a cue, effects will be included, submasters will be included, palettes will be included. But effects and sub, you can set that to red. That means that they will not be included when you record your cue. Classic example is house lights. If you've recorded your house lights onto a sub and that sub is currently outputting, you might not want subs to be included in the cue. When it comes to palettes, well, if that's red, the data will still get included. So i.e. if you've got your moving lights in a position coming from a palette, well, that position will be included, but the palette reference won't. So when that's yellow, you'll be recording a reference to the palette. So i.e. the cue will say, right, well, I'm using these fixtures in this palette. But if you turn that off, it doesn't really care about the palette, and instead it just records the raw values of that fixture. So if that is off and you then go and update a palette, well, if that was off when you recorded a cue, that cue will not be using the updated from the values from the palette. So let's get started. Let's actually record some cues. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open my visualizer window, bottom right of the console, just so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to keep things really simple. I'm just going to go and say 1 through 6 at. And I want to record that as my first cue. There are several ways of recording basic cues, and it's all entirely personal preference. So let's take a look. One of the methods you can use is you can type it in a little bit like text. If you want to record cue number 1, you can literally type in record cue 1, enter. So it's a bit like speech. That way you can just literally type in record cue 1, enter, and we can now see that we have got cue 1 recorded, and the moment we record a cue, by default you will go into it. We can see that we've got a yellow border around our cue, we are in it, and we can see that our fixtures have automatically been released. So we've no longer got manual control over those fixtures are outputting from that cue. And you can see there that that cue has indeed been recorded, because we can see that that was successful in our command line. This time I'm going to go and grab those fixtures again. An easy way to grab those fixtures, I can just go ahead and say select active. That's going to select everything that's currently on. And this time I'm just going to go and say Act 5, enter, to take those to 50%. This time I'm just going to simply say record 2. I didn't click the Q button this time. I just literally said record 2, but doing that, the console automatically popped Q into the command line for me. So you don't need to type Q if you don't want to. You can just say record 2. And I'm going to go ahead and say enter. And again, there we go, we've gone into the next queue. We can see that my values have now changed to 50% there. And we are in Q2. Again, we can see the yellow border around that. Another example, I'm now going to set the levels of these fixtures again. So this time I'm actually going to select active, and I'm then going to go and put an intensity range on these fixtures. So I'm going to go and say at 50 through 100. Do a little bit of an intensity range on those fixtures. And this time I'm literally going to say record enter. And if you do a record enter, this time the console has automatically populated the Q press, and it's automatically populated the next available Q number into the command line for me as well. So we can see there that Q3 has got included, and all we did was record enter. Now, arguably the simplest way we can record a queue is just double hitting the record button. So I'm going to go and say select active. I'm going to want these guys at 20% now, and actually I'm going to bring on 21 through 26 at. And I'm going to actually go and put them in a colour, might as well while we're here. I'll put them in blue, and I'm going to go and frost those up and zoom them out a bit as well. Something like that, that's fine. Happy with that. And so this time, yeah, as I said, I'm literally just going to go record. And if you do a record, as you can see here, tap record once, tap record again, it's populated the Q field and it's populated the Q number field. So a record will record the next available Q number, just like record enter did. So we can record and not specify a Q number, or we can record and specify a Q number. So exactly the same logic, I might want to go and say, right, okay, well, I know that I want 21 through 26, I know I'm going to need these fixtures in red in Q10. I know I'm going to need them in red in Q10. So I can record out of order. So this time I'm actually going to go and say record 10 enter and get Q10 recorded. So you can record things out of order, that's not a problem. And as well as that, you can insert cues. So this time I might want to go and say, right, okay, I know that I'm going to need to add something in between 1 and 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and click on my go button, click on my reset button. Clicking reset resets, it releases that Q stack, and I'm going to click go to go into Q1. And I know before that I go into Q2, I want lights 3 and 4 to go to 0%. So I'm going to go and say 3 and 4 at 0 enter. And I know, right, what I've got on stage, that is perfect. I need that to go between 1 and 2. So this time I'm going to go and say record. And I do indeed need to specify the Q number again. So I'm going to go and say record. I am going to type Q. I don't need to type Q, but I am going to type the Q button. And I'm going to say that I want to record Q 1.5. And then go ahead and hit enter. And that has inserted the Q between 1 and 2 there. And we can see that we can now go back into Q2, and Q2 is how we had it. Now you can actually record to 3 decimal places. So you can actually have 999 Qs between 2 whole Q numbers. So if you've forgotten a lot of stuff, you can indeed insert it again. So you can don't have to rejig the order of your existing Qs.